All right, we're going to start a little bit differently today, and we will begin with our go-to beginning question. But today, I'm joined by Dan Woodcock, managing partner of Unknown.
Hello.
And Andy Harvey, founder and creative director of Communion. Before I ask you who the first person was to make you feel talented, or who the first person was that made you feel, yeah, that works, talented, I'm going to start with my weird invisible question, Andy. And really, this is the question that everyone's here to understand the answer.
I mean, this is it. We can cut it afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do not mess this one up. But Andy Harvey, if you were invisible for 10 minutes, what would you do with that superpower?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, it's a great question. But 10 minutes, that's what got me thinking. It's the 10 minutes bit. Because if you were invisible, you could get up to a lot. There's all the usual stuff, robbing banks here.
Robbing banks, and we are dressed to rob banks.
I mean, exactly. But it's the 10-minute thing, and it got me thinking you could use it for access to something, and like, where could you go that you can't get access to?
Ooh.
You know, so it got me thinking, you know, like, could you sneak into the palace and see what Liz is up to when no. I don't want to see what she's up to, but you know, you could do it. But I think I'd want to go see someone in their full creative flow without any without anyone else around.
Yeah, I like that,
what's Kanye West up to for like 10 minutes when he's in full flow?
Yeah,
I reckon he's just punching a pillow.
Quite possibly.
Without anyone
and
else.
Then I'll take my phone and get that dirt on him.
Yeah.
It's the insurance policy. But no, I think it'd be amazing, right? You know, to see what someone's like without
Unguarded.
unguarded.
That is a good answer.
Kind of fascinating.
Like what would you do? Because I would not. That was not the answer I was
expecting.
expecting.
I think, I don't know, maybe going like to Alcatraz and seeing what's like some kind of crazy like stuff's happening there. Maybe
right now.
Maybe not right. Well, is Alcatraz?
You can. You also have the power of of teleportation.
Yeah. Well, actually, like imagine going in to see Queen record their like most famous album. You know, or like being in there the moment that's happening.
Oh, you're time traveling as well. So you want transportation,
yeah,
time travel, and invisibility.
Yeah, I've gone for it there, haven't I? What would yours be?
I was just going to be like, oh, okay. Well, you know Click.
The day
he's like he pauses time and then it's very immature, but his boss is having a go at him, and he's like, I can't fucking deal with this, and so he pauses time and then he farts on his face and he presses play and the guy can't work out why. Anyway, before I dive into that second question, I do want to ask more of a serious question. And you're a man that believes in the world really, and keeping the world turning. But if you could delete one person from this planet, who would that be and why?
Yeah. No, it's another good one. I mean, there's a lot of flippant answers. I mean, I thought about like, could you just delete somebody who's really just putting out bland into the world? And maybe get rid of Drake.
Wow.
Because, I mean, I don't know the difference from album 1 to album 11. I'm sure loads of people love him, but seriously,
someone else sings on it.
Yeah, no. But I was like, you know what? He's not doing too much harm. Let's leave him be. So it's just got to be Trump, hasn't it? I know it's a bit obvious, but come on.
Yeah.
I know.
Just imagine there's an alternate timeline where that didn't happen.
I know, and we've tried
amazing,
to delete him. We genuinely have tried, and it's not happened. Do you know mine?
He's like the Terminator.
Mine right now is this Andrew Tate guy. He is doing my absolute head in. He's
already. I mean, he has now been deplatformed.
Yeah, I know.
Do you know who this guy is? This Andrew Tate chap.
This misogynist dude.
That's the one.
Yeah.
I mean, we could spend a lot of time speaking about Andrew Tate. There are arguments for and against, apparently, in the world.
Arguments for?
I don't know who's arguing for.
Oh, awful.
But Ian's cutting the conversation. Right, okay, we're diving in. Mr. Harvey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you a question, and you haven't got to overthink this. You can just say the first person that comes to your head. But who was the first person that made you believe that you had talent yourself?
Yeah, that's a cracking one. I'd love to say it was early on, but I think school, like when I went through the whole school and uni system, I think there wasn't really much of a creative pathway, certainly not where I grew up. It was sort of like, I chose art because I just didn't want to do anything academic, right? It was that simple, and that was like permissible at that time, but no one really sort of taught you what design was. So I think it's probably honestly my second job in industry. I had a great creative director called Ramiro who just backed me and just, I sort of felt like, okay, right, I'm doing this stuff with my kind of lens on the world, and and it was actually producing great work. And he was one of those people who didn't step in, didn't try and oversteer, but just like keep pushing it. And that got to some really good outcomes. So I think it was probably him. He sort of like probably championed me without being like one of those kind of like
what agency was
cheerleaders. That was at Saturday, so it probably would have been around 2007, 2008.
Saturday, if my memory serves me, is a fashion. You've got Wednesday and you've got Saturday. That is a fashion-based creative agency. Am I right?
Yeah. Saturday became Wednesday, so Saturday started out as almost pure art direction, and then I sort of joined when they started to get into branding.
It's quite a scary world, that. Because you said second job, right? And I think we had a conversation before about people. Some people don't, feel like they have talent until they're in their 30s or early 40s. Yeah. I feel like fashion in particular isn't a place where you've got the world telling you that you're great, right?
Yeah.
So did that feel...
Not that agency.
Yeah. So why did this guy decide to then, what did he see in you, do you think, to give you...
Maybe I was the only designer that he was working with. Like there was an interesting split. There was sort of like Eric Torstenson, who was like the art director, like the basically founder art director, and you sort of had this little run of 5 characters who were all art directors, and they'd grown up with art direction, so they were like working on magazines, shoots, yada yada, and then they wanted to get into identity, and these guys had less of the design abilities. So I was brought in with, like, Ramiro was brought in to make that side of the business happen. Okay. And so he hired me. So I think there was that sense of, well, I've brought him in, I best make it work. So I think there was just something of that, really. And I think design's funny. I mean, you sort of feel like you can design anything, but my tastes ran a little bit more towards refinement. And so I think there was just something that once he knew he could tap into that from me, it was like we could start to create some good stuff together.
Yeah. Was that why you went for luxury fashion? Because it's not a traditional route for someone that's got an art direction or designy eye.
Yeah.
I guess it is probably more traditional to go, okay, where do I see that? And you imagine like Burberry or a magazine or something like that. Not many people find themselves designing like an FMCG chocolate bar, but that can be a direction where they head into. How did you decide, and why did you pick on in fashion or luxury?
I wouldn't say I consciously picked it. I think it was more, as I actually started an agency called Form that was all music design. I thought I could be a music designer, and that didn't work out brilliantly. It was great fun, but it just wasn't, it's not, thankfully you can see it now, it's not a viable industry. It just happened. I mean, that was just, it started to be a bit more natural to design for that world. I think my taste naturally ran that way, so it just worked. So I kind of stuck with it. I wouldn't say it was a conscious career choice.
I guess it's probably conscious for someone who is interested in refinement, because a lot of fashion is very refined, isn't it, in terms of the style and the look and feel of that type of work. I guess the refinement doesn't maybe exist quite to the same degree with like a chocolate bar. Maybe it does, who knows, there's a conversation for that. But yeah,
it could do. I mean, I'm not really a refined person myself, but I can't imagine that would actually, if I was to genuinely pick a thing that I could never do, it would be that.
Right.
I don't feel like I was blessed with those skills as a child. The kind of, did you feel like when you were a kid you spotted, that's the thing that always confuses me, like what is the difference between someone that is like a traditional designer and then like fashion-y design, luxury brand kind of design? What is the difference there?
That's a cracking question, and I couldn't honestly pin it down to one thing. I mean, I'm quite OCD, so, and I'm a minimalist, and I think there's something that at that moment in time that fitted. Whereas some people I think are way more about like expression and like setting the world on fire visually. And they're just different. I think that's just horses for courses. I think some people are naturally tuned in that way. That's how they make sense of the world. They make visually expressive stuff, so they find their avenue doing that.
For sure. So I guess to sort of bring it to today and now, from obviously your second job where the person made you feel talented to what you're doing now at Communion, it'd be great to hear a bit more about Communion. Like, what is Communion? So we're a creative agency. We set up just about 2 years ago, myself and a guy called Will Williams, and we actually worked together at our previous agency, and we just realized we had a lot in common, and we'd been sort of tasked with what does the agency of the future look like for them. I think they were sort of going through a process. They were like 100 and odd
people strong, and sort of going, is this, how do we work with startups? Are we nimble enough? All this sort of stuff. And we sort of realised the agency future looks very different to what we were sat in. Then COVID hit, and there was other factors, and we sort of went, you know what? If we were to do something, what would it be? And I think we actually went through a bit of a sort of a 6-month process of sort of going, well, actually, what is it? Like, what's the point of an agency these days? Yeah. And, if we were to set up, how do we avoid just being another part of the crowd? It's kind of like, obvious stuff really, but it was just about sort of differentiation. And I think the answer we hit on is that we're sort of seeing a lot of things, agencies don't always tackle culture and like being part of culture and engaging with culture brilliantly. Obviously, innovation's happening at a crazy old speed, and not every agency's comfortable getting to grips with that or helping brands navigate that. And then I think the missing piece in a way was going, the world is on fire. I don't think we can afford to anyone, literally anyone in any industry to sort of shy away from that. And we were like, okay, cool. Well, how can we, as an agency, use that platform to sort of play around in all those places? So Communion was really about how can we help brands on those topics, as opposed to just like, being looked at as a service that does everything that people do today. And that was really where it came about. How can we bring people and brands back together around things they love, but tackling those new kind of forces, really?
Can I ask about, I always find it's helpful to understand the problems that you saw.
Yeah.
And you've covered a few things happening there in agency land, but if you were to pinpoint one or two things that you found were going wrong in agency world, what would they be? You mentioned obviously culture, and you mentioned, but I would have thought out of all places that could bring culture into brands, it would be an agency. Why can't an agency, why weren't they doing that thing around culture or innovation? What was stopping a traditional agency from doing that?
Yeah, I mean, the culture piece is a tricky one. I just think some people are more tuned into, what's an emerging space, what are people playing around with, and who's the latest kind of tastemaker, or people that you want to put into your campaigns and so on. And I think the agency we were at, they were very much like, they came from a product and experience background, and everything was very systemized, it was very rigorous, it would get you to a great identity. But that thing of then, we call it like leaving you at the bus stop in a way, which a lot of agencies do, which is they get you to the bus stop, here's your ticket, now you've got to go on the ride.
Right.
We wanted to go further, which is where I think probably we've both had in-house experience. We know what that journey's like.
Yeah.
And actually I think with doing campaigns with the luxury fashion world, you naturally think a bit more about how people are going to engage with that stuff, connect with it, like how they're going to have an emotional reaction with people. So it's just a different skill set.
I'd love to know what stops them, because I think a lot of agencies would try and get on that bus and try and drive the brand, and then let's keep this analogy, I'm going to struggle here, but here we go. But the brand might go, stop the bus, I want to get off.
Yeah.
What stops agency? Because I imagine every agency, they would make money if they could do that and take the brand further with the innovation.
Yeah.
What stops them from being able to do that?
I think probably it's quite scary if you're in a brand to put all of your eggs in one basket. I mean, we've been lucky, we've had a few brands that are prepared to do that with us, but not everyone is. They just want part of that journey, which is fine. But I think the other side of it is probably skill set. It's like, agencies pitch themselves around their strengths. So you might be seen as the identity specialist. So you're going to trust the identity specialist to do your app or your in-store experience or your campaign? You're probably not. And, they do come from different skill sets. So, yeah, I would say it's probably a bit of caution of like, do I really want to put all my eggs in that one basket?
Okay. Yeah, I was having a conversation recently with a CEO of a branding agency, and he was saying the blocker generally is when the work's been done, everyone's really happy, and then it gets passed over to the client, but then the internal skill set to actually continue that good work to enable it to live and breathe in the way that it was designed to do is often forgotten. So there's a gap between creative talent in a design or creative agency, passing that over to the brand, which doesn't necessarily have the people who have been reading from the same hymn sheet. So it's like, and then it sort of reaches a point where you've done it sort of finishes, and it's like the branding agency is like, great, we did a great work, we've finished that and we've been paid to do what we're doing, but there you go. And it's like, and the brand's like, okay, well we'll utilize this, but where does it go then? There's a gap between that process, I think, which often is the case.
So Communion then, in a sentence, I know it's a lot of pressure when someone gets you to do this, so I realise I'm not going to put on the spot. But I guess the biggest difference then between Communion and a brand identity agency is, what do we say in a sentence?
Yeah, I'd say it's about real world impact. Like, okay. I think everything Woody's just said is spot on for us. Is you see a lot of it. Brands are creating brands. Like the agencies creating brands. It's a great identity, but is it thought through? Is it going to work in the app? Is it built to allow that brand to communicate? They want to communicate on social, on advertising. And I think there's been this sort of like separation, and it's like it's been accepted that that's okay. I don't think it is. I think Communion, our goal is to help you connect in the real world. So we start there and work backwards rather than starting with, here's the brand we want to make for you. We want to start with like, cool, where are you connecting with people? How are you connecting with them? How do you want them to feel? Then let's go build a brand that can go do that.
What would you say your unfair advantage would be as Communion versus a traditional branding agency? If you went up against them now and it's like, oh, we know we got this because we have da-da-da, what would that be, do you think?
Probably connecting end to end. So like our first major client was a big luxury fashion brand called Xenia, and we've done their strategies. We've helped them out with like, what are they there to do, and how are people going to care about it, but we've connected it through to real world things. Like our first gig was a fashion show, and then campaigns, and so we've not started with like this theoretical thing of what the brand is. We've started with actually how do people going to meet that brand, care about it, engage with it, and so it's that meeting in the middle. I think that's our unfair advantage, is we can see the wood for the trees strategically, but we can see it through into the real world. And when we've got a phrase for it, which is essential truths made compelling. So what's the truth of the brand?
Yeah.
Because you can't build a brand on anything that's fiction. Uh-huh. And I think a lot of brands get that wrong. And then you've got to make it compelling, which is the really hard bit, which is like, how do you actually get someone to give a shit and to emotionally invest or to engage or whatever?
Okay, I want to be very granular with this now and get an example. So imagine let's go with Burberry, because you worked at Burberry before. What would an ideal brief, if Burberry came knocking on your door and they said, hey, Communion, we want to do this thing, what would the work look like to you? What would be like an ideal thing that you would do?
Not as theoretical as you imagine, but...
Okay. Have you done a thing for Burberry?
No, we haven't. I'd be interested in doing something that... Because they've been on, I think, a really interesting sort of journey. They've become like a lot more sort of accessible, and they've sort of got the innovation piece already working for them. I think the thing for them, knowing that they're trying to be carbon positive, I'd want to work on something that was like, how do you change the retail footprint, or do something that actually has a tangible impact? How do we create an amazing pop-up store that the story isn't that it's carbon positive, but it is carbon positive? That for me would be fascinating, because it's like, how do you just create a moment that then the story to customers is just like, here's a great space to meet the brand in, or do something with the brand in, but the net outcome and the story for the industry is that you've done something that's super positive. That
would be really cool, because if you didn't realise until the final moment, it's like the grand reveal is like, you haven't noticed any difference here, but actually this is a massive impact on,
it's an aha moment rather than a leading campaign, because I think that's where a lot of that was my next question. What does shit purposeful campaign work look like?
99% of what's out there. No, that's harsh. It's for me, the difference is probably, is that brand doing something because they know they ought to, or because they believe in it? Like, there's a lot of CSR stuff. I think the problem is, it's like a lot of it's on the edges of what the brand's actually doing. So it's like, oh, look over here, we're doing all this, like, we'll make you feel good, but they haven't changed the core of the product or the brand or how they're operating. That for me is just like, I don't know who's being taken in by that. I'm sure a lot of people are, but I just think it's nonsense, bullshit.
What's an example of that?
I mean, you put me on the spot, but probably the Mercedes one that you wanted to chat about later is a classic example. The Mercedes EQ thing. I mean, it's permissible because it's for the electric car range, but equally, Mercedes as a business is still producing majority petrol cars. Are they taking it on themselves to change the needle? Absolutely not. So you're trying to have this halo of making people feel good about the brand, but the reality is 85% of that brand is still terrible. It's not great.
Yeah, I read this saying is going around in my head that I read once, and it was, does the promise of your brand live up to the actions of your business? And I think if you use that halo above that Mercedes campaign, it feels right, because you're kind of going, yeah, it's like a look over here, but don't actually look what we're producing and pumping out into the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Is that the litmus test then, do you think? So when a brand knocks on Communion's door and they say, we want to do some purposeful work, or we want to do some work that's good for the world, how do you bullshit detect quickly?
Yeah, I mean, look, the first thing I'd say is I hate do-goodery, and I hate the wordiness, and I'm very aware there's a fine line, and we might get perceived as being a bit, a bit too far sort of down the purposeful route. But I think for me, it's just about, we talk about being good ancestors, and do we think that company is on the path to doing the right thing? And we've trying to have those conversations early doors with every client of these things are important, and where's the brand headed? And I think that's about as much as you can do. We read up, we do our research, you check, if there's any obvious red flags. We've got our no-go areas, obviously. I mean, Kalashnikov's probably not on our on our list, but hey, somebody's going to get a great piece of work out of them. Probably got the money at least. But no, I mean, you got to do it. I mean, it's like, do you want to work for Coke? For us, no, because I just don't see how you can perpetuate what's going on. Unfortunately, they're a great brand, but they're not. As a business, I don't think they're moving the needle quick enough.
Why not?
Yeah.
What aren't Coke doing?
Why
would you turn down Coke?
I mean, it's plastic. Well, actually, it's two things. It's the obesity. It's like the core of the product isn't great. I mean, and like all the feel-goodery in the world, I don't think gets away from that. I think we're going to look back on this in 20, 30 years and be like, wow, how did we allow that to happen?
Yeah.
But also the plastic. I mean, that's not a great situation to be in. Could they be approaching circularity? Should they be, how can they really push the needle on the packaging design?
Yeah.
I think there seems to be this sort of, let's wait for someone else to leap.
Yeah.
Someone else will work that out. And then, if somebody will invest in how do we get around that problem, then we'll just leap on it. It's like, why can't you leap on it? Why can't you reinvent your own business?
Yeah.
We don't see it.
We were talking about this recently, because I think there is a level of iteration, isn't there? Evolution in brands. And it might be that it takes one person to help them transition into being a better brand for the world, whether it's changing perceptions about a topic or it's changing, their environmental policies. But does that mean that brands are always going to be bad, or does it take incremental steps to make them better? I don't know. It's a kind of a broad question, but
or is the question, like, should we have? And I'm gonna play a different card here. Do we have sympathy for the brands who are, let's be honest, a collection or a team of marketing people going, I feel really bad that we haven't done anything for sustainability. Can we do something around sustainability? And in their little humble position of marketing director of said brand, are they doing anything wrong by briefing an agency to say, can we do something? I feel really guilty about this. Can we do something about sustainability? In these organizations, whose shoulders does it land on to genuinely change the actions of a business?
Yeah. I mean, I've not worked at a massive corporate like a Coke, so I couldn't honestly tell you. I would hazard a guess. In my opinion, everyone's got some degree of influence over that situation. Yeah, the senior leaders ought to have the vision, for sure. But if the feedback isn't getting there from anywhere else, they've got less reason to change.
Yeah.
So I think, if you're a younger marketing person and you want to make that difference, it probably doesn't sit well with you to just sort of tickle around the edges and make everyone feel good about something that's not so good.
Yeah.
So you probably should, and there probably a lot of them are looking for their next opportunity to do something if they believe in that, which is, that's on them. But,
I think you have a really valid point, but the differentiating factor is there's a big difference between going, we are going to design something which is changing our business, can you help us? And we want to do a campaign which is going to flog more stuff, but we want to harness it in a green way.
Yeah.
That there's sympathy for me when there's actively trying to do difference, and it's like, wow, these guys are really trying to change something. But not if they're just trying to pull wool over people's eyes.
Sticking a badge on it and going.
I mean, you see it a lot with the Nikes of this world. I mean, they're doing a lot of stuff that's good, and I think they've been incredibly transparent that it's going to take time. So, but you'll see the sort of the moment they've started to talk about it with Move to Zero, you'll see a lot of people then slamming them and going, yeah, but that product isn't sustainable, and you've not done that yet. I think there's a lot of people who are waiting to shoot it down rather than sort of accept it's not perfect, but if the brand is trying, then that's got to be lauded. Surely that's good. To your point, the actions are revealing.
Definitely. I read a thing of you speaking about positive impact, or at least when I go onto the site, I see those words, positive impact.
Yeah.
Nike's a good example, but have you got any other examples, or I guess what does positive impact look like to you?
Yeah. I think it's. Again, I'll just caution against being too worthy and too purposeful.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would just be incredibly cynical and switched off. I think it's about just trying to take charge and lead in your own way to create something that's positive. That might just be purely creative, or that might just be, pushing the needle in one area. I think that's perfectly valid, and I think there's a ton of brands that are doing it in big and small ways. I mean, we talked about Rayburn on the way in. That's fascinating. Of like starting with the attitude of how do I, reuse existing clothing or existing materials to make stuff, and then rebuilding the creative output around it. Or say Stella McCartney. I mean, all my references are fashion, obviously. But Stella McCartney, starting with like I read that she sort of famously, if she wants to say replace leather, well, she doesn't use leather, but like use a leather alternative, she's happy to wait 5 years and then design the products, right, because it will be the right thing to do rather than push a new product line out into the world. And obviously that's a brand that's taking off massively. So I don't think it's commercially unviable, which I think seems to be this thing of like, oh, well, we're killing our business if we don't, if we sort of go down this path. Or, a brand like Heckles, for example, Hackles, I never know how to say it, but like, they make all the stuff out of like seaweed and like that's sort of like the core product, the attitude, the ethos, the emotions around it. The packaging is like, you can put it in the ground and it'll sprout flowers. Like it's circular.
It does.
Which is fascinating.
It does sound wicked, and I love hearing that stuff. But I do look at it skeptically, going, it does seem for some of these brands, is it a gimmick? Have they done that because, or are they? You mentioned about Stella McCartney not putting out something else into the world. That's amazing. But I do feel like a lot of them people go, oh yeah, okay, got it. You've got one eco product so you can sort of tick that box and say that's the eco thing done.
Yeah.
How does the needle then move? So Malcolm Gladwell speaks about the tipping point where it goes from 50% to suddenly 51, then everything changes.
Yeah.
How does it go from there to? And this is a really hard question to answer, but is it like more creative communications, or is it like internal design for the products that these companies are making? Where does the tipping point start to happen, do you think?
Jeez, you need a smarter person than me. I mean, look, who knows? I guess it's going to come from a range of all those things. I don't think there's a silver bullet.
No.
And I don't think chastising people's going to work and making people feel bad for their current choices or for wanting a better lifestyle or new things in their life. I mean, I don't think we can unplug that from, ourselves as people. But I'm going to guess that, I'd like to hope a lot of people maybe this summer had a little bit of an epiphany of like, there's wildfires in your backyard, there's water shortages, there's food shortages. This is happening now. It's not happening in 20, 30 years' time. What we do can make some difference, not all the difference. I don't think we should all run out and try and be, poncho wearing, eco-activists overnight.
You're not a fan of Extinction Rebellion?
I mean, I like the logo.
It's quality.
I don't think they've got sort of like cut through with everything else.
But that's a fair point. And actually, we can stick on that, because the worthiness is what turns people off, and the kind of the chastising and the you're not as good as us kind of approach is wrong.
It never works.
No. How do you combat that as communion? So when you work with a brand, do you because you could get an eco warrior as a marketing director being like, no, it's going to be much more shouty. How do you kind of stop that from happening and sort of piss people off with a worthy kind of purposeful campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we talk a lot about future positivity, and I think it's like could come across as a bit of a gimmick, but I just think like we're optimistic about what can be done, and I think if we can generate that with brands, that's sort of a lens we try and put to them when we start working with them, so they know it's on the agenda. Okay. And like to give one concrete example, we work with a startup that's putting regenerative farming, trying to bring it on scale to the UK, and basically regenerative farming is basically there's no chemicals, there's nothing bad happening, and it's actually a lot more sort of wild. You basically consciously allow the thing to be rewilded a little bit. And we worked with them, and they were exactly that. They were like, it's a movement, and they were trying to work out the enemy, and it's like, is the enemy the supermarkets, and is the enemy this? And it's like we sort of just did a lot of a lot of awareness building. We did, research gathering, and we're sort of like, it's not going to fly because you're either going to piss off the consumer or your partners or the supermarket chain. And what you really need is people to buy into it and believe it's just a better way.
Yeah.
And so we talked about like radically natural farming and just trying to give a positive take on what could be seen as a really sort of like confrontational topic.
Radically natural farming.
Well, I guess for you, as from what I remember, you're vegan, right?
Yeah.
How did that?
I'm all the cliches. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is your poncho today?
That must.
You
have
told
been,
me to take the poncho off.
Yeah.
And you brought a tree in here as well. You were chained to.
I mean, it is a bit hot. So, yeah.
Yeah, that must have been an interesting one to work. I guess from your perspective, it's like making people's choices better rather than going to a mass, like a huge farm, blah, blah, blah. It's a bit easier. That's a more conscious choice for someone, right?
Yeah, and it's just giving, way I look at it, is giving that a chance to succeed. It's not, I can't influence it beyond what I can influence.
Yeah.
I just want to help that thing happen and make it, give it the best chance to succeed. And I think if we can make people feel more positive, I think that's probably the better way to do it. It's not the easy way to do it, but it's probably the thing that will have more impact.
Fair enough. I feel like now is a good time to ask you the question that I like to ask people, which is, what are you still really shit at? And this can be as a founder, as a vegan, as a creative director, whichever angle you want.
Don't pick on the father one. I'm creating many traumas for that poor kid. Trying to make it a designer. It's probably not going to want to be a designer.
No.
She told me this morning she just wants to clean the streets. I'm like, all right.
And work in a plastic factory.
God, I mean, look, you can always improve yourself, can't you? I mean, I'd love to have more time to exercise and look after myself, but that's a pretty cliched, obvious answer. But I mean, I think I'd love to be able to bring more people along with me. I think like I'm could be pretty driven, and sometimes that can be taken as confrontational, and like not always sort of like giving people space to sort of like buy into what I'm about. But yeah, I don't know.
So is that more?
Probably not a cracking answer, but
no, it's a good answer, because I think, particularly as a founder, you can doubt yourself, and also you can really believe in yourself on the same day. So I can imagine one day you're like, oh my God, we should have 10, 15, 20 people running behind us, sprinting into battle. And the next day it's like, fucking hell, thank God it's just one or two of us or whatever. So I guess it's an honest answer, actually.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's a very emotional journey being a co-founder, just because it is naturally, some days you're up here and then you're down here, and it's like riding those waves is hard. And I think sometimes you try and keeping the positivity up for other people and not letting the negativity sort of like become infectious. Yeah. I think that's always hard, isn't it? Because you want to be honest.
Yes.
But there's like maximum honesty, and then there's like letting people in but making it like feel like we're still going somewhere.
What's normally a huge contributor or a big contributor to a bad day at communion?
Good question. I mean, look, deadlines are always tricky. I think it's balancing priorities, isn't it? Like, we've got things we need to get on with, and then sometimes you're just on the back foot. And I think we're on a bit of a learning curve. Certainly I am, on just that accepting some weeks will just be terrible. Let's just do the thing that needs doing, and like not try and be superheroes and get other stuff to happen, and then come back a bit more recharged and get other stuff to happen.
Is that hard? The shift. I know when you're starting a disruptive agency, particularly one that's kind of pointing back in the old way and saying that's broken, and be as honest as you can be, is there any parts where you're looking into the future of communion, you're going, ooh, how is this thing that we said was going to be different going to work out? Yeah.
I mean, look, I'd say you get that stuff every day where you're like, wow, okay, like most decisions you're sort of like, there's an easier way than this, for sure, but the easy way doesn't really come back to you in the way that you hoped. And I think when we cast forward, I think what's been like amazing is we took a punt doing this. I wasn't sure if people were going to really care, buy into it, whatever, and we built up some amazing relationships. We've got some great clients, and we're having conversations with people that I didn't think we'd be able to get into as a 2-year-old agency, which is amazing. And the same's been true for talent. So all the people that want to come work with us, and we've got a great freelance roster, and we're bringing on a few more full-timers, and I think they really get it. So it's been nice putting something out into the world that it's got a strong opinion and a strong lens, and people can back away from it and reject it, which is totally permissible. So it means that the people that we engage with really get it. I think that the thing for us is we're massively proven, but behind closed doors, but we're unproven. So as an agency, we can't show a lot of our stuff. We're very quiet. I think that's going to be hard. I think people are having to, stick their neck out to work with us, I'd say. So I think that's going to be our big battle over the next few years, is getting to the point where people go, no, I know those guys, I get them, and I'm happy to work with them. I know what I'm getting from them.
Yeah.
I guess that's always the hard thing about starting an agency, right? Because no one knows who you are. Like, when Unknown started, no one knew who we were. I mean, it's a stupid name because we want people to know us, but like, you do have to somehow manage to get yourself some proven work, and if you've got none, it's hard to show people what you've done. Yeah. So you have to lean on your background and experience to be like, we can do this. Like, we've done this before, but this is a new generation of what we're trying to do. So I imagine was that a challenge at the start?
Yeah, I think so, and especially because there's a bit of a lot of the design agencies in particular seem to want to speak back to the design industry rather than speak to clients. So there's like a massive hype machine of like, a new project every 2 days, and aren't we amazing, and we've interviewed this person, and it's like, it's cool, like, I'm not knocking it, but that works for a certain type of business model, and it doesn't work when you're maybe doing things that take 6 months to manifest. And you want to be a bit quieter. You want to let the like, if you're working with a massive brand, you want to let them put the thing out to the world before you start talking about it. But quite often you're seeing like, that's a different dynamic.
That's really hard, because you can't go like new branding for this FMCG brand, or new campaign for this sort of turn dial that's going to be going out the whole time. And because like, what you're doing is on the edge of an innovation, which, by the way, is where most failure happens. So, statistically, your campaign that is around making this product or brand innovate could fuck up. Yeah. So you don't want to be going out shouting to the world, being like, we made rubber laces and they burnt in the rain. Yeah, that didn't work out for everyone.
You know what? So, the thing that's really challenging, that you can see straight through, I think, hopefully other people have noticed, and not just me, but you see agencies sharing case studies of work, but the reality of that is it probably hasn't yet been utilised by the client. Yeah. So it looks great, right? You see it and you're like, holy shit, this is an amazing project, but actually that hasn't been rolled out by the client yet. So when it gets to them, you see it and you're like, what's happened to that between this case study that I've seen on social media and the brand actually utilising it? Whereas what you're doing is you're kind of putting your money where your mouth is, because when you've shared it, it's when it's out in the world, and people. So I guess there's value in that, but then it shoots yourself in the foot. I mean, and
it's going to be great few years. I want to ask one more question before we move on to our section 2 of what is happening in the world right now. And this is just a thing, and it's going to put you on the spot because it's just come to me in the last 20 seconds. I want to ask, in a year's time, what would you be super proud of getting done? And it's like, you're a year away from right now. It's August 2023, and you're going, I can't believe we did with Communion.
Honestly, it'll be quite small. I think it'd be the fact that we had a space. I think that'd be really nice for us to, we're a bit of a lockdown baby, and we've all been working remotely, and we've sort of smashed it in a lot of ways, but it's been really hard for everyone. And I think if we were 7 or 8 of us, and we actually had a space that we could gather in a few times a week, I think that would be enough of an achievement.
I love that. Yeah, maybe it could be a commune.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Who knows? We could convert.
This is actually on my.
Really?
Actually on my thing. Oh yeah.
You can have non-uniforms for everyone as well, which would be, I don't know, maybe that's too far.
I'm gonna have to send you the mood boards. It's pretty close to the bone.
Fair enough. Okay, so this we wanted to speak about this because you're a person that understands and works with brands that are trying to become better, more purposeful. Mercedes are being accused right now for greenwashing. Definition of greenwashing. Anyone want to define greenwashing? How would you define greenwashing, Andy?
Well, I think it's a smokescreen, isn't it? I mean, greenwashing is, it's the veneer rather than the substance.
Thank you. We'll take that as a great definition. To try and explain this image, which I have on my iPad right here.
Whoa.
It's parts of the planet, which, if you know the Mercedes symbol, you'll know it's a kind of weird medallion sort of triangle thing, and they've done a circle around parts of the planet like a cracked earth or a rose petal. What do you think about this campaign?
I think some ad agency's probably getting a can lion, but I don't know if the consumers
I think they're getting a can line thrown in their head.
Well, that too. I mean, it's clever. I'll say that. It's clever.
Clever?
You know, it's a visually clever thing. Like, I'm not... The creativity that's gone into that, I don't think should be knocked. I think it's smart, you know? But is it... What's the message, for one?
Mercedes.
Mercedes are on the planet.
Yeah.
Like, it's... and to the conversation earlier, are they making a difference? Like, is that truthful? I'm not convinced it is.
And why is it not truthful?
Because I'm not convinced that... I mean, look, maybe I'm being harsh. If it's for the EQ line, I get it. It's for electric cars, they're making a difference. But because you're using the Mercedes symbol, you're kind of making a point that Mercedes, the brand, is on the nose and it's super ethical. And I think it's a bit hazy for me. I think it would be, I'd prefer to see them just being honest about the journey they're on rather than trying to sort of make it feel like right now, aren't we amazing? And that's the difference, is just be honest.
I agree. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
That's the actual point, is like the honesty that this lacks. And yes, it's a visually stunning campaign that's lovely to look at. And the honesty bit could have ruined how nice it looks.
Yeah, but the tagline is nature or nothing, right?
Oh,
so
that's a good point.
So
right,
then that kind of changes it for me.
Nature or nothing. So that's basically saying either buy our EQ cars or don't buy the other ones.
Yeah.
You got one option: EQ cars, not the G Ultra.
Awesome.
But, not the really expensive ones.
Yeah. Unless you want a G class, they are petrol, but they're wicked.
Exactly that, and that's the problem.
Okay.
It's the heart of the problem for me.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because it's sort of the greenwashing factor is it's beautiful to look at, right? And it's clever and it's interesting, but equally like the message is not aligned to what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
The message is not aligned to what they're doing.
Unless this is the only ad that goes out for the next 5 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it can't be anything else with a petrol car.
Yeah.
Wow, it's a slippery, tricky place which some brands that we love and adore are probably going to get wrong.
Yeah.
But thankfully, we have communion to pull them back. That's 10% on the next briefing company.
100%.
Okay, we're going to move away a little bit from greenwashing for the moment. I feel like we've done a lot of. We made you speak about purposeful stuff, so we're going to. And this is not your world, but we're going to dive into it very quickly. It's a weird one. It's a weird one. Yeah. But, okay, PwC. I can't believe this. PwC are being sued, right, by an auditor for somebody who's gone out on a night out playing mini golf and getting pissed and having a head injury. Right, I'm reading that for the second time and I was like, wait, hold on. I was chatting to Ian, who writes our call sheets for us, and I was like, what do you mean? And I'll explain it again. Person has gone out on a company work night out.
Chosen to drink.
Sorry, chosen to drink, the bastard. And he's gone out on this night out and he's got very drunk playing mini golf. Okay, it's an event. I think it's mini golf. And he's basically seeking £200,000 in damages because he was encouraged to drink on the night out. Now, I'm going along the vein of that, what a fucking idiot. But actually, has he got a point? Is the question I'm asking you. Should he and should we be inviting these people out who clearly can't handle their drink and saying this is a work jolly? What is going to happen to the world?
Do you want me to answer this
I
one?
do.
Okay. I mean, firstly, it's hard not to laugh at that. Like, it's obviously bad that this guy's got hurt, and we shouldn't advocate anyone getting hurt. But it's just like, I couldn't ever imagine myself in that situation where I would think that was the right line of action. Like, clearly we've got a culture in the industry around drinking is the way we socialise, and there's lots of probably problems around that for lots of people, but it's so ingrained in our culture. So maybe we need to work harder at designing things that aren't just around drinking. And I think we've spoken a lot about this at Unknown, because the recruitment industry, if anyone doesn't know, is exceptionally bad for people going out and drinking. Like, in my first couple of jobs in the recruitment space, it was like Wednesday to Friday every week, sometimes Tuesday if everyone was feeling good. But it's like, and I think that there is a bit something wrong with that. But I don't know. I don't feel that much sympathy for this guy, if I'm completely honest.
I think that's fair enough. And actually, like, that isn't the question I think we're asking. I think you've made a good point in saying, actually, maybe this person didn't want to go out and get drunk. Let's just be in his corner right now.
Yeah.
And maybe he didn't want to go out and get drunk, and maybe it really, like, he really wasn't good at drinking. Someone's gone, "Oi, Montgomery, neck a pint," and he's gone, "Oh, fuck, I'm really bad at my booze." "Oh, okay," and he's necked the pint, and he's gone,
Smashed himself in the head.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
glass.
And he said, "What do I do? Put it on my for fuck's sake!" And poor Montgomery's fallen to the floor, and he's knocked his head, and he's like, "I knew I shouldn't have drunk." I'm building this character now that I feel quite sorry for, but it is true. Do we have an issue? Because I'm probably quite bad for it. I'll be like, "Oh, let's go to the pub. Everyone's had a really good week," and people are probably like, "I want to go to the gym and exercise because I'm much more about my health and fitness than I am about having 17 Beaver Town neck oils."
No ad.
Another ad. You're welcome. Okay. The question is, like, should we? What can we be doing essentially to be not putting people in that place?
Do you want me to answer it again?
Yeah, man.
Okay, I'm right under the spotlight for this one, aren't I? Literally. I think it's all about just asking the question. You know, it shouldn't then be. You don't. It's hard, isn't it? Because if a night out is designed, someone's going to feel guilty about not coming to that, right? If they don't want to. I guess it's setting the agenda of, you don't need to drink when you come to these things. It's not about everyone getting completely battered and that's what fun is, because, you know, I've had moments where I've chosen not to drink for a certain amount of time. Ollie and I both done this, and you do receive this really bizarre kind of like call outs from people who are like, it's like you've literally shat in their shoe sometimes. Like, there's a guy we used to work with, I won't name any names, but it's like...
Is that what he's suing for?
yeah. He has head injuries and shit in his shoe. Is what,
But it was like January, like dry January, and like it was towards the end of the month, and it's just like, I went to the pub and I wasn't drinking at that time. And it was like, why are you here? What are you doing? Why would you come here if you're not drinking? And it's like... I think that's where the problem of all of this lies.
Totally agree. It's the shaming. It's the booze-free shaming that I think we need to stop. Mm-hmm. People go, they don't. When someone is around you that isn't drinking, it's natural to be like, why not? But some people make it about them, and they feel guilty that they're not giving up alcohol for a period of time, and then they start to project that on you, being like, "Oh, come have a beer. You're no fun without any," which is not true. You're not fun without any alcohol. It's just that you can't really understand that person. I'm being clicked at. We're going to move on. So, next up, this one I thought was mental. So ASDA these titles are being slammed for embarrassing yellow packaging. They've chosen yellow packaging for their new products. You know, Sainsbury's Basics have Basics range. ASDA have chosen what I thought were relatively nice yellow packaging. What did you think about this, Andy?
I mean, I think first thing I'd say is at least they're doing something. You know, I mean, I think that what's coming around the corner is going to be great for a lot of people, and you know, it looks like it's, from what I quickly looked at it last night, it's healthy, you know, nutritious food on a budget. That's good, you know. And I think the old codes of budget are equally as kind of shaming in a way. So at least they tried to do something. I'll give them credit for that. I mean, it seems like a lot of people just want an argument, don't they, these days? Like, that's what I'd see when I see the news articles. It's like, oh, let's whip up a bit of hysteria. Like, it's good packaging. Does anyone care that much about the packaging? I don't know. Maybe
that's what I thought. Really? I thought was that an oversight from me?
Well, I actually read into this because Mother Design like put it on their LinkedIn, which was the first time I saw it, and they were saying like, these are the there's obviously an issue if people feel attacked by it, but actually this is quite high level packaging for a basics level range of. But there was like interviews with people saying the yellow made it really obvious that they were choosing that. Like, the actual colour choice drew people's eyes to the fact that this person was choosing the cheapest level of food.
So they want discretion.
So I think it's more about it being too vibrant and too noticeable. But I don't agree with that personally. Like, I think actually what they've done with it is good for, you know, and I think it was done by an agency. I don't know who did it, but I don't know. It's like, I agree with Andy. everyone wants an argument about something.
Yeah.
But I don't think this one's necessarily justified, to be honest.
I think it's a bit overblown. I don't think anyone's going to care in 2 weeks' time.
No, they're not going
No.
to care in 2 weeks' time.
I think partly it's that it's a bit obvious, but it's cheap and cheerful. It's like
Yeah.
they've sort of picked on a bit of a cliche there. It's like cheap food, great.
Yeah.
Cheerful. Is it a bit patronising? Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. But you can see what they were trying to do is like, let's make sure people can see it. It's identifiable. It's not
Yeah.
playing in the old codes of what basics are. It's
Yeah.
like it was the right approach. I think maybe just,
Loud and proud.
slightly less cheerful.
Yeah, fair enough.
I was
you know.
chatting with the guys in the office about this because we thought it was mental when it first came out, and Joe was saying that ASDA actually do probably the most for like they do food boxes and they donate to charities, and like ASDA as a supermarket is very good for sort of charitable donations and things like that. So they probably took it quite bad. Like that must have hurt them to know that they've tried to do something good and it sort of bit them in the arse a bit,
Well, yeah, that's where they mainly advertise as well. That's the price for you.
Mm.
Okay, I'm happy on that front. I'm happy we've discussed the yellow packaging being slammed by ASDA. I have to be honest, it wasn't in the forefront of my mind, but now we've spoken about it. Fair play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're moving on. We're going to move on to elephant vomit. And it's funny that this section is called elephant vomit because I'll tell you why, Andy, in case you're wondering. The reason we've asked you to bring along your elephant vomit of the industry is because we were going to call this elephant in the room, but it was kind of cliche. And then we thought, what makes you want to puke about the industry? And then we thought, let's combine them together.
That's it.
So this is our elephant vomit section. Andy Harvey of Communion. What are you bringing along today as your elephant vomit?
Yeah, I think I'm going to change it on the fly. I was going to talk about diversity, but I think it's a bit too. We've been a bit too wordy. I feel like,
Thanks for the honesty, Andy.
yeah, and I feel like you sparked this one conversation earlier, which is I think we've sort of gone like when I started the industry, and probably even 10 years ago, like creativity could happen without massive amounts of strategy, and I think bringing strategic consultancy into our industry has been good. It's put a lot of agencies into the boardroom. It's elevated design, but I think there's just a lot of naff strategy that I think just gets in the way of creative. So
Wow.
I've been on the receiving end of too much stuff that it's jargon for one. I mean, just and let's face it, a lot of agencies do this. We're at the intersection of blah and blah, and it's like, no one knows what that means. Like, help me out. I'm a human being. Just tell me. Like that. So like the jargon bit just kills me. And then I think there's this sort of like, I call it the illusion of rigor. It's like the 200-page keynote deck that tries to tell you everything, but there's no conclusion. It's like, if you can't say it on a page, I don't know if it is a strategy.
Yeah.
It's research. It's not the same thing. Like, and we've had to pick up briefs actually, even as Communion, of like, somebody well-intentioned, but just created this massive thing, and then clients going, I don't know what to do with it. Help me.
It feels quite rude, doesn't it? It's like you just walked into some weird, like, nutty professor's blackboard with like E = MC squared, and then he's gone, right, there you go.
Yeah.
That's my strategy.
Yeah.
And you're like, what the fuck is that? Gary, you're going to come in and brief that down? It's a brief, right?
Yeah.
A strategy brief to a designer or a creative person is brief.
Yeah.
That is not brief.
100%. I mean, a strategy should get things to happen.
Yeah.
It should just set a new direction or help people to feel good about the direction they're on or whatever. But I think if you've won the argument but not won people over to change or to a new direction, I don't think it's actually valid, and I think it's harming our industry a bit because it's sort of that always comes ahead of the creative, and I think we're sort of stifling a little bit of that sort of like, just maybe we just need to take creative leaps and just go for it in some instances too, and that's just been sort of rubbed out of our industry in favour of data and reassurance from strategy, and that's not the only path.
Do you think it's because agencies can charge more money if they run a longer strategy phase?
For some agencies, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, by the way, I'm not advocating for like no strategy. I'm just saying like, let's make it simple and actionable and heartfelt, and just make it an easier thing for people to engage with. But I think, unfortunately, I think there can be like it's like tugging on a ball of string. Like, say you're working for a massive company and you want to change something. It's like you do a bit of research and then, oh, that's made me think about this, and then you just That's what the McKinseys of this world are great at, is just keep tugging on that ball of string until the whole thing's unraveled.
Yeah.
Like, that can be an infinite journey.
Yeah.
You know,
Smart. You can see
you know,
why
it's
consultancies are so loaded.
It's a cracking
And
business
why are they
model
getting
for them.
sued £200,000 for a night out? All right. Well, I'm really happy with the fact that you brought essentially shit strategy as elephant vomit, because I think there'll be a lot of people that will agree with that.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you so much for this. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, understanding what communion is about. I mean this when I say it. I do feel like you've untangled what I felt was quite a complex and sometimes ignorable subject, which is purposeful stuff. A lot of people don't know what it is, and I think you've made it very human for us to understand. So thank you for that. I'm gonna leave my part here and hand over to Woody and say, Woody, is there anything that you would like to say?
Wow. I wasn't
throw you on the
expecting
spot?
this, but yeah, no, thanks, Andy. I think that we often, all the time, get briefed. New agencies pop up every day that are talking about how purposeful the stuff they're doing and all of that. And I think actually, as Ollie said, it's really interesting to understand where and the why has come from for you. Like, actually, why are you doing this and where it's come from? And it's also nice to hear you say, I don't want to be too woke here because I've not got all the answers. And that's human. So yeah, it's great to understand a bit more of that. So yeah, thank you.
No, awesome. Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
sir.